Good evening, folks. Thank you all for coming along to the webinar. We're just going to let the room fill up a little bit more, which I can see is filling up nicely. So welcome to everybody just joining. We'll be kicking off in just a few minutes' time. But yeah, again, thank you all for coming along this evening. We'll probably kick off at about 3 minutes past. So feel free to grab a quick drink in the meantime if you need to grab something, and yeah, we'll be ready to kick off shortly. Hello to anybody that's just joined. Thank you all for coming along. We will be kicking off in a moment. Just going to allow a little bit of more time for everybody to come on board and settle in, and we'll kick things off in just a minute. But yeah, good evening to everybody wherever you are, or good morning if you're in different time zones as well. Thank you very much for joining us. Looking forward to kicking off and hearing from the chaps in just a moment. So for anybody that's just joined and that is with us now, you'll see there is a poll on the screen for everybody to get involved with. So feel free to answer that, and we'll come back to the results in just a minute, whilst again we wait for a few more people to join. But the question is, do you use technology to help you with either your physical or your mental well-being? And for anyone that thinks I'm at a funny angle, I'm on my phone. My laptop's been playing up this afternoon, so just as that's why you've got me at a lower setting. Hopefully not too much of a deal breaker. Cool. Well, room's filling up nicely, and just conscious of time, we've probably got a fair bit that we want to get through. So I will kick things off for us, but not before I read our results. So, do you use technology to help you with either your physical or mental well-being? Yes, a resounding yes. 18 out of 22 responses came back with yes. 2 came back with no, and 2 with not sure. So, okay, well, that's great to see people are using that to their advantage. And for those that haven't or aren't sure, hopefully by the end of this, we may have a little bit more information and get a few people thinking. So anyway, just to introduce myself and what we're doing this afternoon. So yeah, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where people are. And just want to say a big welcome to the Soda Social live panel discussion, Talking Tech, Men's Health Reimagined. So as most of you here will know, we have partnered with our friends at Code Institute. And for those that aren't aware, we're running a hackathon partnered with them in conjunction with this event. Really looking forward to it. It'll be kicking off this Saturday, and look forward to meeting everybody there. So Code Institute are the world's first credit-rated coding bootcamp. So dedicated to producing career-ready developers. And we have some learners from Code Institute in this session. So welcome all. And we also have the judges on this panel as well, who I'm sure you get the chance to meet at the weekend, pick their brains and bounce some ideas off of them, which hopefully will give you a little bit of inspiration this evening as well. But also welcome to our Soda Social community that have tuned in as well. So you can expect an hour of a panel discussion with live Q&A, and at the end of the session, we'll have half an hour networking for those that wish to sort of continue the conversation further as well. So in terms of introductions, my name is George, and I will be the host of this webinar. I'll also be hosting our day on Saturday. So for those I've met already, look forward to seeing you again. And for those that I've not met yet, I look forward to it. And yeah, we want to make this sort of discussion as engaging as possible. So if you have any questions at all throughout, anything springs to mind, feel free to ask them in the Q&A section. And we'll get through as many as we can. But if not, we will hopefully be able to answer some of those once we move into the networking session afterwards. So just last thing before we kick off as well, this session is being recorded, and it will also be uploaded to our Soda Social YouTube channel, where you can also access our upcoming webinars and podcasts, and also some of our past access to events as well. So I'd like to stop talking now and pass over to our fantastic panel. Three great gentlemen that we've got here as well. Industry experts with a real good passion for sort of stamping out the stigma of men's mental health and mental health in general as well, and through the use of technology. So I'd love for you folks to introduce yourself. I'll go left to right, who I can see here on the screen. So Luke, it'd be great if you could introduce yourself and say hello to everybody.
Cool, thanks, George. Yeah, I'm Luc Marchand. I'm the CTO for enterprise storage at Otherworld Computing. It's a US-based company, makes direct attached and network shared storage. I am a South African that lives in London, working for a US company. So I've also worked in a ton of different fields in technology. I've worked in live video streaming and a couple of other things as well. So yeah, looking forward to seeing where we go today.
Thank you so much. Great to have you on board. And we'll come to Tim next, please.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. So yeah, my name's Tim. I work at Tillo. We're a global rewards and incentives fintech based down in Hove on the south coast. I've been working as a software engineer for a couple of years now. I'm a Code Institute graduate just before that. My background previous to graduating the bootcamp was in music and live music touring.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tim. Last but not least, we'll go to Daniel, please.
Thanks, George. Hi, everyone. My name is Daniel Walker-Murray. I currently work at Google in the cloud division. I manage our global accounts within the financial services industry. My background is mostly in sales. Been in cloud for about 4 years now, and then before that, a financial data firm called Bloomberg, and then had a previous life in politics.
Nice. Thank you so much. Very varied experience from all of you, and it's great to have all three of you on board. So thank you so much. And look, we'll jump in at the deep end. We'll get stuck in. So as everybody knows, we're looking at a few different topics for this, and the first place I'd like to really start is around sort of the stigma and supporting the silent majority, we could say, and that sort of silent crisis term or silent majority term has often been described as sort of men's and men's mental health. So historically it's not been sort of widely discussed. And if I come to you first, Daniel, how can we give people a voice and change the way that we communicate for the better, do you think?
Yeah, thanks, George. For me, I really think a lot of the issue is around an information gap. There is a stigma, as you said, around being compassionate, and there's really kind of archetypes as a man that you are allowed to express in terms of emotion. But I think really giving people a platform to get information that they need in a way that's digestible is really the first and biggest step to trying to overcome some of these stigmas, because as I'm sure many of you on the panel and the people listening have felt, it is hard to come by that information. It's hard to find people who are really talking about men's mental health and health in general. So first and foremost, I think access to information is important.
100%, I agree. And I think what I've seen certainly this month as well, and it should be every month, but certainly sort of Movember, being a focus. So you've done a great task there, Daniel. Didn't go unnoticed. I think, those sort of incentives, making it enjoyable, people are fundraising, in the office, they're talking about things. It really helps, I think, to lift a lot of weight, certainly off of men's shoulders, because often there is that stigma. And I think, really, I think it is that information point you say. A lot of people don't understand how to sort of get the benefits and the help. And I think communicating, getting the information first is paramount. And Tim, I'll pass the same question to you, if I may.
Yeah, of course. I think picking up from what Daniel said as well, the information is really important. I think information about organizations that can can help with getting the sort of support that you need is kind of lacking as well. Because at a certain point, I feel like there's a policy level problem with access to men's mental health services unless you're on kind of like private healthcare or some sort of via the NHS. My personal experience is that it's actually quite tricky to get that support unless you're like in real crisis mode. And there's an organization called Man Up, which is a play on that hideous phrase, but they or organizations like them that have the sort of platform to get the ear of the politicians to make policy changes and get the information out there, but also once the information is out there, actually making the access better for people when they need help, I think is something that's really lacking at the moment.
100%. I think, man up. I think for everybody in here, if everybody takes down note of that, I know that a lot of people on this webinar are going to be starting, if not already, building these applications. So things like that, I think, Calm is another page I would point people towards. Get inspiration from these sort of pages and utilize them. Maybe you need to use it for yourself whilst you're doing that research. I think it is definitely good to look into these things. But if at the very least take a bit of inspiration and a bit of user research for those that are going to start building applications this week. But thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate you going into that. Now, I think you're in luck. We've got another poll coming as well, something interactive for everybody to have a look at. And it should appear on your screen in just a moment. But I'll start off reading that now. So the question is, do you use any of the following to support you with your health? So that could be mobile apps, health tech gadgets, something that we were discussing, which I'm sure we'll come on to, is Whoop, the wearable sort of health tracker, which is great, and I'm sure we'll come on to it in a minute. But social media is another one, websites, chatbots, whether that's speaking with AI or somebody that's live, podcasts and webinars or other. So if everybody wants to take a moment to gather your thoughts on that, put down, is there anything that you use to support at the moment, or is there something on there that you could use? But whilst everyone's having a little look through that, I'd love to come to Luke. There's a question I'd love to hear from you and the question is have you seen any specific examples of technology being utilized to help reduce the stigma attached to sort of speaking openly about men's health?
Sorry, I broke up for a little bit. So just if I think about my personal journey with health, mental health, physical health, there's a lot of really easy, accessible, mobile apps. And actually, I was surprised by some of the Apple ecosystem stuff with the Apple Watch and the health app. The new mental wellness stuff that's been included inside of there, polling up every day, kind of saying, hey, how are you feeling today? How are you feeling right now? And that linking into other apps like Nike Running or one of those things, where you can kind of create a gamification between friends and a group of friends getting together and sharing those results with each other. So you can instantly see how other people are feeling, what they're doing, and being honest about that, I think is a really good way to break the stigma. It's not always easy to go and sit down and be like, hey, mate, like, how are you feeling? Tell me your feelings. Like, what do you, that's not something that, if we go back to the previous question, that men are traditionally do. It might be beat around the bush about it, but getting into some of these apps and ecosystems and just kind of living it as part of your day-to-day is a really good way to kind of break down those barriers and start to just openly talk about that, whether it's in person or offline. I think that's one of the most important ways that I found currently.
Awesome. No, I appreciate that. I think, as you mentioned there, getting it into more of a routine, sort of checking in day by day. And I think I find that sort of muscle memory of checking in, having these regular conversations is really beneficial. It's something I practice with a lot of friends of mine, and commonly and openly, it's like they might see a slight change because you're catching up more regularly. If that's possible, I definitely recommend it. So again, thank you. And Tim, if I could ask you the same question, is there any sort of specific examples of technology you've seen that sort of support that and help to reduce the stigma or benefit people?
Yeah. So again, like I'll slightly pick up from Luke was as well, like I did with Daniel, but I pick it up on the Apple Watch thing. So I picked I was fortunate enough to have Vitality through work, and got one. You're encouraged to, close your rings and take breaks, and which is really important for your mental health and physical health throughout the day, the working day. And you get rewarded by, getting money off your new gadget or whatever. But I also found with apps like having an 8-month-old and a 4-month-old, it's tricky to stay in shape. And so I recently used Noom for a few months to sort of try and crack out of some bad habits. And when you sort of fall off the wagon there's like a big user for sort of a community sort of forum section that and it's so that application is so interlinked between the relationship, your mental relationship with healthy habits, that sort of, although it's not men focused, that I found that a really positive experience of linking those two things, because they are so intrinsically linked. That if you're feeling good, or for certain things it's linked. And so being able to go onto a forum where it's I've had a bad week and not really eaten well, and people are just like, oh, it's fine, give yourself a break, just get back on it next week. And that sort of positive reinforcement sometimes is all you need to sort of go, okay, actually it's fine, and not spiral. So yeah, really helpful for me.
Awesome. No, I very much agree. Sorry, remind me, Tim, what was the name of the forum? Is that an internal one, or is that something that's public?
It was on if you use Noom, the application, it's like got like a calorie tracker thing, a bit like MyFitnessPal, and it gives you sort of but yeah, within that application there's a sort of user forum section that you can log into and chat to people and see how people get, share recipes or whatever. It's that sort of thing.
Nice. Yeah, nice. Everyone that's listening, take notes. A few ideas for applications. There you go. And perfect timing. So we just had the poll results come back. Here we go. So a resounding here we go. Mobile apps, as you can all see, is something that's very popular. Health tech gadgets. It's great to see that that's popular as well. I think websites, social media is also great as well. And I think naturally podcasts are always popular. I think often for me, if I've got a bit of brain fog or my head's not in the right place or I'm stressed, take 20 minutes, half hour, go, try and get your rings closed, listen to a podcast, get out in the fresh air, I think is something that's super cool. So I would have voted podcast on that one for me as well, which probably links a little bit with mobile apps as well. But cool. On to the next point. So Daniel, I'll come to you for this question if I may. So how would you say social media has positively influenced this silent majority, mainly around men? And what are the positive aspects to consider when crafting a product tailored for men's health?
Sure. So from a social media perspective, I'll harp back on this information gap that I perceive as kind of the main issue. I find, especially with the newer algorithms on Instagram, for example, you're getting pushed a lot more content than you probably would have before. A lot of accounts that you wouldn't generally seek out. And sometimes that's good, sometimes it's bad. But from a health perspective, I find that I'm able to get a lot of content around, mental well-being and particularly physical well-being. Now, again, you have to take a lot of that information with a grain of salt, depending on how prestigious or trustworthy the individual is giving you that information. But it has opened up my mind to kind of other types of fitness, for example. I find, I've spent a lot of time over my life focused on fitness, and you kind of get stuck in your groove, but moving outside of kind of what you're used to actually brings this whole new aspect and kind of can get you out of a rut. What was the second part of the question?
So yeah, the social media positively affecting it. And what are the sort of aspects to consider when crafting a product, tailored for men's health? It might be, as you sort of mentioned there, access to the right information,
Yeah, and I think also just access to broad amounts of information. If you spend too much time siloed on one school of thought, I think with any science, you kind of miss the full picture. And in my opinion, being more of a generalist around health is very important. So crafting a way to get a wider range of information. And that's kind of what we're seeing with a lot of these applications, right? Like Whoop, Fitbit, they're good standalone, but there's nothing really looking to bridge that gap across different IoT devices, wearable devices, and information centers. So I think finding a way to bridge the gap either between disciplines or devices could be super powerful.
Another idea for everybody on the call. I like it. No, thank you again, Daniel, for that. If I move on to our next sort of section, really is around that sort of strength, through community. I think something that all of us have mentioned so far is having, somebody to lean on, communicating with people, whether that's colleagues, friends, that communication and having a sort of network. So if we look at recent research, it indicates that individuals experience improved mental health in a support group setting. So Luke, if I come to you for this one, what sort of benefits do communities, whether that be online, offline, offer to an individual's well-being?
I think all people are incredibly social and enjoy interaction with other people, and I think it creates a feeling of not being alone, like there's somebody else that experiences the same problem. And we're talking about Tim was talking about his kids earlier, and I think it's really easy to, under lack of sleep, to your mental health to start to take a dive and think like, what am I doing wrong? Why is my kid not sleeping? That kind of thing. But being in a group of people that are experiencing something similar kind of takes that doubt and the fear away from it. And helps you kind of be on like a steady standing ground, that you're not alone. You're not the only person going through this thing. There are other people that go through similar things like you, and just having that closeness with someone and be able to reach out to somebody to chat when you need to really creates a solid platform.
Awesome. And I very much agree. And Daniel, if I could get your thoughts on that one as well, around the benefits of communities, whether that's online, offline, and what can that do for somebody?
Yeah, no, I think a lot of the science right now is pointing to there's a direct correlation with COVID and our isolation from one another and people's mental health. And so we've seen a huge decrease in the mental well-being of, everyone, but men in particular after COVID. And I think a lot of that is just kind of being stuck in our ways from COVID, spending a lot of time indoors and not with other people, along with all the other distractions we have around, social media, video games, television, that type of thing. And so there's a pretty clear, direct correlation between the two. And, talking about solutions, there's a lot of people who are trying to address that. You see the different applications like Meetup. Bumble has released a Bumble BFF, I believe, where they're looking to just connect people for friendships. So it's definitely a gap that people are trying to address. But I definitely think there's a lot of opportunity to innovate still in that space. Nice.
And something as well that, this is what we wanted to innovate on these hackathons, is get people together. I think, and Tim was probably similar when he was doing the course. It was all sort of virtual, and a lot of it still is, but for those we can, it's great, if it's once a year, twice a year, if we can try and get people together to do an in-person event, it's a fantastic thing to do. And for everyone on this call, we look forward to Saturday as well. And it's a really awesome event. I think something I've seen as well is that some people can be nervous. It's like venturing out that comfort zone again. I think that's also something to address, is that it's okay to be nervous. COVID has taught a lot of us to be a little bit more nervous when it comes to coming out your shell, getting outdoors. But taking that first step, even signing up to this event, is something that, is just, hugely beneficial. Signing up, I'm going to be there. Whether or not you make it, it's that first step. And I think, for those that are coming along, it's very well done. It's a good step. And I'm sure on the day you'll be super relieved and happy to be working alongside people, picking up knowledge. And there's a reason I've done a few of them now, because I enjoy it so much. Again, look forward to it. Now, Tim, I believe we sort of touched on it earlier, but in terms then of the examples which enable sort of communication, interaction, and engagement, I know you'd mentioned a forum. Has that been, really super beneficial, do you think? And is there any other examples maybe? you can think of?
Yeah, I really liked that one. That was actually in my notes for this question too, but I've already sort of talked about it, so I burnt that little tidbit. But yeah, so there were a couple that I thought of for this question. There was sort of and it touched a little bit on the social media aspect of it and on the parental thing, but like there was for anyone that does have kids might know who Nigel Clark is, who's a CBeebies presenter. But he runs an Instagram community called Dad Vengers. And throughout the pandemic, like that was, really helpful. It was lots of posts and lots of, like kind of virtual meetups and drinks and stuff and sort of support system for parents of or specifically dads that might be struggling with their mental health or just in general without that sense of it. In the same way that men's mental health is less talked about, that sort of support system for dads isn't really there in the same way that it is for mums as well. A lot of the time, so it's getting a lot better. But my experience was, when my wife went back to work, we were still pretty deep into the pandemic. After our firstborn, I was still studying at the Code Institute, so I sort of, because we weren't able to get our son into nursery or childcare, I sort of took on sort of primary caregiver for a few months, and it is quite isolating. And so communities like that were really helpful. And then on a broader sense, and this sort of harks back to my old world. There's charities like Nordoff Robbins that are like access to music therapy charities, which focus a lot on mental health. They focus on all kinds of help and disability access to music therapy, but a big focus on mental health. And they ran there's a series of gigs that were run. They have sort of ambassadors in the music industry that really shout about it, and they run things like there's a London community choir that they run, and all sorts of studies into how music can help with mental health and anxiety and ease the pressures of that. So companies like that, I think, is an example of real sort of positive community engagement for a community run sort of thing.
That's awesome. And Tim, can I ask a massive favor? Would you be able to put that in the chat box for everybody, just so they can have a quick look at that website, maybe draw on a bit of inspiration?
Sure.
Thank you. And yeah, I agree. The musical side, as you mentioned, to harking back to your previous career, is music podcasts. I find it's different for everybody, but it's an instant stress reliever. If you are having a tough time, if you need to step away for 5 minutes from your desk or go for a long walk at lunch, music, I find, normally does the job. But yeah, it's definitely something I'd recommend. So again, thank you, Tim. Cool. I'm loving this. There's some really good varied answers, and hopefully everybody's getting some good value and taking down some notes. I think Tim's just put that in there for everybody. So feel free, have a browse, draw on it, get some inspiration, maybe even the way the website's laid out, things like this are all good things to take into consideration. So my next point then is moving into our sort of third and sort of, third out of fourth sort of different topics. So we're going to have another poll. So that should appear shortly on your screens again. So in your opinion, how does technology impact education the most? So you'll see that on your screen now. You could say it enhances accessibility, personalizes learning experiences, it provides easy access to information, or it promotes problem solving, or we have an other section. Now, it doesn't have to be an exact science, doesn't have to be one of them. But yeah, have a little sort of think about these questions. Again, might provoke an idea, a bit of inspiration, but again, it'd be great to collate the feedback on that one as well. But just while everyone's sort of running through that, I'd love to firstly start you with a stat. I'm enjoying the quotes and the stats so far, and I'll follow up with a question. So it has been reported that 59% of men between the ages of 18 and 24 have never checked their testicles. So this comes on to the men's more physical health, which is all around Movember and men's testicular cancer as well. So with the education tech market estimated to be, wait for it, $288.4 billion by the end of 2031. Is there potential for technology and education to team up and aid in addressing the ongoing health crisis for men? And Daniel, if I come to you first, have you seen any examples of this happening already, or is there potential for technology and education to team up on this?
Yeah, I mean, definitely both. I think there's still an opportunity in the technology space to, and hopefully that's why we're here, to kind of help address these issues and help get access to a lot of this information, as well as crossing over a lot of the existing information people have, right? Like you may have a Fitbit and you may have another device tracking, Calm, for example, but they're not speaking to one another. So there's an opportunity there. Education for sure. I mean, I'm the same way. Podcasts are part of my daily routine. And there's a lot of people who are really looking to push information out there. Professor Galloway is a big one who talks a lot about men's health and what masculinity means. So reframing masculinity into really being, what we strive to be as men, which are caring partners, thoughtful people, contributing positively to society. And talking about how it's not a zero-sum game, right? Like focusing on men's health doesn't mean we have to not focus on anybody else's health. And I think there's sometimes a kind of line in the sand drawn around it being a zero-sum game, where I don't think it is. So there's definitely, Andrew Huberman is another great one who talks a lot about men's health, but there's definitely an opportunity there. Bridging the gap with technology. I'm a little biased because I work in tech, but I think is where we need to go. But hopefully someone on here can figure out through technology how to bridge that education gap and kind of bring it all together.
100%. No, again, I agree very much so. And Luke, if I can come to you on that same question, please.
Yeah, EdTech is become a massive industry. When I was in South Africa, I actually worked in education technology in junior and senior schools, trying to solve a problem of just getting information to people, right? Because information is power. Having easy access to the information is the most important thing, and anybody and everyone should be able to get any information that they need whenever they need it. To answer the question a little bit on the nose about men never checking their testicles, there's actually a company called Manscaped, and they actually created an iPhone app that's called the Ball Checker, and it actually guides you through checking and what you should do, and even have a subscription service like an SMS service where you can SMS them and they'll give you monthly reminders to go on the app, and so they've linked both texting and application and that kind of thing. And I think that's a perfect example of doing something really simple. So it doesn't have to be complicated. Doing something really simple where there's an app and a text service and you're solving a problem. Because if you can sign up to that service, you can get reminders. I think that's pretty much what EdTech is about.
100%. I love that. And I didn't actually know that about Manscaped. So I knew that obviously they were that sort of, men's health, and they had a lot of really good initiatives going on. But again, that's something that's new to me. I'll check that out for sure. Very nice. Okay. Well, thank you, chats, for both of your answers there. And I've just seen it come in as well. Alfie's just popped in the next link as well for 7 o'clock. Which will be, a short networking session for anyone else that wants to come along as well. We'll continue the conversation for sort of 20, 30 minutes on there. But perfect timing as well. The poll seems to be coming up at the right time this afternoon, which is nice. So poll 3. So we said, out of the following, how does technology impact education the most? And I think a theme of this, has been the information as well, which is nice. So it provides easy access, to the information as well. And we've got a few people that mentioned around it personalizes learning experiences and it enhances accessibility as well. And last but not least, it promotes problem solving. So cool. Thank you so much for everybody that has participated so far in the polls. Now, moving on to my next question is all around sort of closing the gap between innovation and adoption, which I think is quite an interesting space. Brings in the information piece, brings in the education piece. So the so-called innovation adoption often occurs when innovative ideas are unsuccessful in making their way onto the mainstream market. But Tim, if I come to you, what sort of key considerations should one keep in mind when designing a product to bridge this gap to attract the sort of early majority?
Yeah, I think for me, the main thing that I thought about with this was just sort of the usability and the UX in general, and like the amount of steps it takes to get to the sort of the goal or the message of the application or of the campaign or whatever it is that someone has picked up and is trying to explore. Like, you know, because there is still this stigma around masculinity, and I'm very pleased that it is changing. And like I've been guilty of this in the past. I try not to be so much now, but if there's any sort of, you know, slight feeling of embarrassment around some of the subject matters or exploring these issues, like if you might be able to direct someone onto an app or a website to start looking at it, but if it's got that feeling of like it being a bit of a stigma around it, then if it's not like really clear really quick, then you're more likely to get people that are still suffering from that sort of that masculine, like, horrible stereotype, that might click off of it and, like, you know, oh, this is too tricky, oh no, don't, I'll just leave it. You know, so I think that was what really popped into my head, is making that user journey as slick as possible, to making sure that once someone's logged on to do something, that they follow through and do it, you know, or reach the message of whatever the application is trying to get across.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's yeah, I think definitely having something simple that if somebody does want support and help, it's quite easy to access. I think often as men, I saw a funny meme the other day. It says a lot of women's products, they have shampoos, conditioners, things. It's like, men, here's a 6-in-1 body wash. You can use it to wash your car as well, you know. So if you can have something simple that's easy to interact with, that gets you from, you know, click here if you want support to know more. Boom, straight through to information. Here's a link you can use. Something simple layout that's fast and effective for people, you know. But yeah, I totally agree. And again, thank you for your point for people to keep an idea out as well when building these applications. Now we're heading towards the end now. Got a couple more questions as well. And just to remind everybody, Alfie has now put in the link for the networking session at 7 o'clock, but we're going to open up the floor to everybody else in a few moments as well for any questions they want to ask live to the panel or myself. But if I move into a next question as well, so Daniel, I'll come to you on this one as well. And I think definitely this is going to be super beneficial for everybody who is a developer or a scrum master or whatever it is on this call from Code Institute, when it comes into taking into consideration about what users want. So in a crowded market, Daniel, how can a health-focused application set itself apart and resonate with users, would you say?
Yeah, so I think Tim touched on some of it. UX is definitely important, but given the state of play nowadays, UX is usually a pretty high and kind of a bare minimum when it comes to health applications. I think really the best way for health-focused applications to differentiate themselves are around personalization, innovation, so giving people access to something that they don't already have through all the other devices that we already have. People don't need another heart rate reader. We have that. People don't need another step counter, but having something that incorporates all of that data into something larger is important. And then also, it also goes back a little bit to the question you asked before, but being able to scale, right? Like, it's great if you can get 10 users, but if you're creating a chat bot that you have to type out an answer to every person who's asking you a question, you're not going to get past 10 users. You want to create an LLM that's going to be able to ingest the data that you need it to and push out answers to everyone who has questions in that space. So really being able to scale your solutions is really how you're going to make an impact in this space.
Nice. And a question I would say on a more general scale as well is either Luke or Tim, is there anything you'd add to that as well that you might have done, or anything that within a crowded market, what you can use to sort of use on a health focused application to set itself apart?
Luke, have you got anything you want to add, or should I just jump
I
in?
thought I'd throw it out there just in case.
It's always different, right? And I think Daniel's right about scale. Like in a crowded market, there's a couple of things that you need to figure out. I guess it's finding a way to engage with people on their own level, on their own personal level. And if you can scale that, then that's a great thing that you be able to do there.
100%. And now my closing question, and Luke and Tim, I'll come to you both for this question. So, in terms of this of what we're going on, obviously we've got the exciting hackathon that I'm sure people, as soon as they jump on this call, are going to continue, sort of coding on and obviously be working probably late through the night, some nights, and fitting in time where they can over the next few days, and obviously finishing things Saturday and presenting back to us. But what sort of advice would, and I'll come to you first, Tim, on this, what sort of parting advice would you give to anybody who might be partaking in the hackathon, working with Code Institute?
Sure. And I guess this draws a little on what Daniel was saying about coming up with something where we've got step counters, we've got heart rate monitors, but coming up with something that pulls all of that stuff into one place and gives a unique solution to a problem that has been identified as needing solving, or that might be beneficial in the sort of the quest for knowledge on men's health or on health in general. That's something that would be important to try and keep in mind, is sort of identifying a problem and figuring out, coming up with a solution for that. And then on a more practical level, just having done a couple of them and being quite overwhelmed by the hackathons, is don't try to do too much. And having now worked for a while professionally, I would just say, if you try and come up with a solid concept and something that you're pretty confident you can deliver in the time frame, a better use of time might be to get a solid idea and then leave time to have like a bit of a ruthless review of it and iterate to make any improvements on what you've already done, rather than try and just bite off more than you can chew and just get the first version out just in time for delivery. Yeah.
Awesome. And Luke, if I can throw that question to you as well, please.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is to not overcomplicate your solution. Trying to find a really simple answer to a complicated problem is always the key. Make things as simple as they can be and no simpler, which is cheesy to say, but there really is elegance in simplicity. And like Tim says, give yourself time at the end. Don't overcomplicate it. Don't try and get too stuck into adding bells and whistles. Just look for a complicated problem, a simple solution, and nail it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So that wraps things up in terms of our panel discussion. Daniel, Tim, Luke, thank you so much for that. I'm sure there's lots of information in there, some nice nuggets as well that everyone's going to be able to take away and utilize over this next sort of few days leading up to Saturday. I think my takeaway really from this, and don't worry, we're not just finished just yet, we'll come on to some live Q&A in a second, but I think my sort of takeaway from there is definitely understanding really, what impacts users is one thing. I think, think about yourself. What is it that you've not seen that maybe should be out there? The information piece, I think that Daniel started off with and sort of followed throughout, linking that information, researching that information, and linking the two between your product and utilizing that. And, as Tim and Luke both mentioned, closing off there, don't overcomplicate things. Find a complex problem, simplify it, create something that looks nice, that works. And we look forward to reviewing them all on Saturday. Again, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. We've got some questions now. I think one question here we've got from Kate. So how important do you think anonymity is for men to break barriers? Is it helpful, or could it just stump progress? I'll throw that out to the three of you chaps here.
Yeah, I tried to answer it in the chat. I didn't realize it was coming here, but I think it's a two-sided sword. On the one hand, it's good to give people a safe place where they can ask questions, but I think on the other hand, it's also important to start to create those communities. Like we were talking a little bit earlier, there is some loneliness in being anonymous. And so, if you can see and meet people who have the same types of questions, or, have answers for questions that you have, and you want to be like them, it's important to be able to see them and know who they are to really get you to drive that information home. If someone's giving you health advice, but they don't seem that healthy, it's, you want to make sure you're also getting information from someone you want to look up to. So I think it's a tough question because it could go both ways, but I think in the end, more transparency around these issues is really what we're striving for in men, and kind of being more masculine and sharing your feelings and sharing the issues you're going through. So I would lean that direction.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Is there anybody else? I think, bear with me. Let's have a quick look, see if we've got anything more in the QA. Of course, we've got another one here that's just come through. So good question as well, actually. I think it's a very prominent question as well. It's a good question. So it says, it's from James. It says, I was wondering how to approach creating a site that's targeted at men without being too stereotypical about what men like and dislike. One thing I would just say on that is, from my side, if I was going onto a site that wanted to be inclusive, is you could use something that you think will appeal to both men and women. I think, there's different color schemes you can use, obviously, which traditionally go towards men, but nowadays, men like all different colors. I like all the colors of the rainbow. It's not just blue, black, dark. There's different things. Feel free to be expressive with the site. If you're targeting the content and it seems as if it's male focused, I would say that will draw men. Depends how the advertising is. We mentioned about Manscaped. Maybe even think about these things, like what would marketing schemes be like, then try and sort of thread that into the website. Manscaped is always slightly more focused to that male audience within their adverts, but obviously it brings in a big crowd of probably both sexes as well. So it's very diverse, but I would say don't pigeon yourself into just being stereotypical men. I'd say open it up, because you want to have lots of different footfall. You want to have all different races, genders, diversities come into your site, because there's other people that are going to find it useful just outside of men as well. So that's from my side. I would say keep it open and be open to changing things depending on feedback. I don't know if anybody else has any thoughts. I took the floor there.
Go ahead, Luke.
I was going to say, something that's great about design is that great design is agnostic of gender. If your design is good, if your UI is good, your UX components are great, when you're creating your site, you will attract the right type of people. So I think it's less about worrying about the stereotype, but just focusing on having a really great design that draws people in.
I think it's also important just to be genuine, right? Like because you're here and focusing on these types of problems, your head is probably in the right place for people who have a similar opinion. And I always think about Rick Rubin, who's a famous music producer in the US, talks about how he has no technical skill, but he's confident in his taste in music. And so, if you're genuine with your approach and genuine with your design, people will recognize that and be drawn to it. And I think that's one of the most important things to remember as someone who doesn't design anything or is not technical at all.
Awesome. All sounds good. And guys, feel free to keep the questions coming. I'm just keeping an eye on our Q&As here. Cool. If anybody, feel free to put anything in the chat or into the Q&A. All right. Okay. So it looks, I'll give people another 10, 20 seconds. Feel free to throw anything into the chat. Here we go. Sorry. I think it was my mistake. I missed a question. So I think we had a question that came in from LinkedIn. Cool. So the question that we had on LinkedIn, so it says here, it seems as though AI is being used more and more in tech products. Do you have any advice on how I can implement this in mine and any curveballs to avoid? I'll throw it out to everybody.
I would defer the use case to Tim and Luke. I'm a little biased coming from Google, given that's kind of what we do. But I think there's a huge opportunity right now in AI, and it is going very overlooked by many people. And there's that famous quote by Professor Galloway, who also talks a lot about mental health. AI is not going to take your job. Someone who knows how to use AI is going to take your job. And so I think if you have the opportunity to use AI in a product, it will give you a heavy advantage. The one issue is data. You're going to need a lot of data to train your models on. And so if you have access to data, then that is definitely a great use case. Low amounts of data sets and sample sizes is going to make it very difficult to create any kind of successful AI model. But that being said, you can outsource a lot of that. You can purchase existing models that are already trained. Obviously, maybe not for this application, but in general, there are ways to get access to it.
I was going to say the same thing. Like training an AI is always going to be the biggest stumbling block, right? Like, and also, what are you going to do with that AI, and how are you going to train it on the sample size that you need for what you're trying to achieve with that? So yeah, trying to get an AI that you can rent or buy or have trained for you is probably the best way to approach that.
Awesome. I won't mention anything because I don't have a clue about it. I know how to use ChatGPT, and that's as far as my knowledge seems to go on AI. Is there any other questions from anybody? If not, I will let everybody have 8 minutes back before we jump on at 7 o'clock for the networking. I think Alfie has just popped that in the chat for everybody as well. But yeah, if not, feel free, have a toilet break, go grab a cup of tea, get a glass of water, and we can all jump back on in 10 minutes for anybody that wants to come along. If anybody needs to chip off, feel free, and we can see you all on Saturday. But yeah, if there's no other questions, or if anybody pops into their mind, feel free to join us. I will be on there, and yeah, we can see you all on there. But if not, yeah, we'll see people on Saturday or in 7 minutes' time. But I just want to say a big thank you to Luke, Daniel, and Tim. I've thoroughly enjoyed this, and it's been great working closely with you folks over the last couple of weeks, and hopefully people got some real benefit. And yeah, we look forward to seeing everybody on Saturday.
Thank you for putting this together.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And yeah, hopefully we see some of you. It'll be in the chat now for the next link for the next call, which I'm now going to copy and paste, and I'll see you all there in about 5-10 minutes. Thanks everybody. Have a good evening.
Yeah.
Thank you. Cheers.
Awesome. Cheers. Bye-bye.